Hello, viewers, and welcome again to another episode of Novel Ideas. My name is James Floyd Kelly. I'm here with my friend Eric Wex. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Viewers, we're going to go ahead and tell you, never hire Eric or I to handle any of your technology IT needs. We always have issues with something. It's always something so technology related.
I am not a sound man.
Oh man, video, this streaming thing. How do you do this? Anyway, hey viewers, welcome again, Novel Ideas. We have got I think we've got a really good topic that we both agree on today, and it's something that we have not talked about yet. And Eric, it's about being a writer and dealing with social media.
Yep. Everybody says that if you're a writer, you have to have social media accounts, and I think a lot of us writers, I think one of my good friends, Maylin Miranda, says that writing is acting with words, that we're actors, and that's kind of what we're doing, but we do it with words rather than with our body. And I think that's a good way to say it. And we're kind of shy that way, and you know, and then it's kind of asked of us that we have a presence online. So that can become a bit of a conflict for a writer in trying to figure out how to do that in a way that's sustainable and in a way that's enjoyable, at least to some extent.
You know, I have a lot of writers, a lot of my favorite writers. I used to be very religious about following their web pages, and then it became blogs. And now it's transitioned to, there are a handful of writers who I follow on Twitter, and
yes.
I like Twitter better, mainly because I can flag certain keywords and things that pop up and alert me and stuff. Whereas with a blog or a website, I had to just go visit it whenever I felt the need to go do it.
Well, the other thing that makes Twitter a great place for this kind of fandom is that when you follow, the commitment is how many characters? 164. Right?
140.
140, right? It's 140 characters and no more at any one time.
Right.
So you're not being asked to read long essays. And from the creator's side of things, you're not being asked to produce long essays or something like that in order to maintain a Twitter feed and have interaction with people who are interested in your work. So
yeah, for me, the reason I like Twitter and following certain authors, especially fiction authors, is they usually are not tweeting about their books or their, I mean, some do, but what I find interesting is the writers, I tend to really enjoy their tweets. It's not related to their stories. I'm learning a little bit about their political takes. I learn a little bit about their opinions on cooking. You know, the funny ones will always post photos of their travels and stuff, and it's kind of nice to see that side of a writer that you enjoy.
I think that gets right to the very first point that's important to make to writers, is that social media is marketing, not advertising, and
right.
and the difference between marketing and advertising is that while you can talk about your product occasionally when you're marketing, you don't want to push your product in your social media, or make that the only thing that you talk about in your social media, or you will quickly bore people. It just isn't. It's not a very good sales platform. I don't think social media often. I mean, there's always going to be the exceptions, but I don't think social media is often about direct sales. There are other ways to do that. Social media is much more about interacting and maintaining a fan base who will care about your work, who, as we've talked about before, right, the main way to sell books is word of mouth. This is helping those people remember your name when they're asked, what have you read recently? Right? Yeah. That's much more about what social media does.
Well, let me tell you, one of my favorite fiction writers, he writes urban fantasy type fiction. His name is Richard Kadrey. And he's got a series of novels based on a character called Sandman Slim. It's for some, the books, people love it. You either love it or hate it. But here's the thing about Kadrey. I follow him on Twitter. If you read his books and you like what you read, you'll find that his personality tends to find movies and other books and things that he believes well, things that he enjoys, and therefore his readers will enjoy. But the other reason I like following Kadri is this: he doesn't use it as a promotional tool for his books, except he will usually let us know, his fans, when he's finished a rough draft, or when he's got the title, the cover image or something. He shares little bits with the fans, and it makes it worthwhile to follow him.
So, as a reader, what I'm hearing you say is that for you, social media is about getting behind the scenes. So it's about getting behind the scenes with the author. So you want to know, you're interested to know something about, oh, they're in Hawaii this week, or right. they're at Dragon Con, or whatever it is that they're doing this week related to their career.
As a matter of fact, one author that I followed, this happened maybe a year ago, I through a tweet, I found out he was going to be doing a book signing in Atlanta. I live in Atlanta.
Right.
And without going to his website and clicking on, tour information or book signing and digging down and looking, I would have never known, because I don't go that route anymore with the writers I follow. But because I followed the tweets, I saw that he was going to be in Atlanta. It was so easy to go, yeah, I'm going to be there, and that was a nice little feature that Twitter gave me that I would have totally missed without it.
Yeah, absolutely, and so for the writer, I think that's the piece that we've got to understand, is that this is about people interacting with us, and the value of it is in that interaction that you have with people. So I want to explain how I use Twitter and Facebook along those lines, and in particular, when I get to Twitter, I want to talk about how I changed Twitter. Actually, I've changed both of them in the last year. So I started out with a traditional Facebook page, right?
Yep.
And I had I think I had 350 traditional Facebook people, who were involved, right? And I think we've talked about this before. I did a quick survey with my audience because I was frustrated. I was launching books, I was writing things, and I was realizing I was getting very little feedback from my audience. People were not actually purchasing my product, right? And I don't think I was being super pushy. I was still interacting on Facebook in a pretty healthy way, but my audience wasn't buying. So I went and asked what my audience of friends and family, who made up the bulk of that, what it would take for them to actually purchase a new author. And they came back with, word of mouth and traditional media reviews. So, getting an NPR review was probably not, or a New York Times book review was probably not on my agenda in the next year. So what I realized is that my audience on Facebook of friends and family was not going to be a successful audience for me when I actually tried to sell my work. So I converted my personal page over to a Facebook, or my personal Facebook profile over to a page, right? So I want to make sure I distinguish that. So pages are for business, profiles are for people, right? So I converted it to a page and brought all of those people with me. Now, I lost some people. Like, I think some people were irritated that I disappeared from Facebook. And Facebook in the last year has really tailed off how much they allow on a Facebook feed from pages. And they also forced me here in January to decide whether or not I was going to become a true business user, because I was kind of in a gap. I had a page, but I didn't have either a business account or a personal account to go with it. And Facebook forced me to choose one or another. So I now have a regular Facebook page. And for me, this is my being writerly and kind of shy and stuff. I've decided I'm not going to let that page get to more than 100 people, because I don't think I can interact significantly with more than 100 people. So that's my decision on how to use Facebook. So I have that as being really my tight, intimate friends, and then the Facebook page is for those followers of my work, and that's where I interact with them.
Hey, I think it's important to note also for the viewers who are watching, there's been a lot of statistics related about Facebook recently, and one of the big statistics that really blew me away was how few teenagers, 20-somethings and younger, are using Facebook these days. They're going away from it. So, as a side note, since we're discussing Facebook, if you're an indie author and you're writing young adult fiction, Facebook's probably not going to be your best. It can be one solution, but it's not going to be your ultimate solution.
I've had success. The little marketing test that we've done with Gossamer, that we did back in November and December with Gossamer on Facebook, it really went quite well with the teens. My teens in my household still use Facebook. What I would say is they all have Facebook accounts. It's just not the chief means that many of them are using for communication. And that idea that there's going to be one central hub where we all do our social networking is really shattered. So one of the things for an author not to do is to chase things that they're not comfortable with, right? Like I don't do Instagram because I don't do a ton of photos, right? I'm not taking selfies all day, and so because of that, Instagram doesn't work for me. Tumblr, I've never gotten into. There's a lot of authors who successfully use Tumblr. I don't understand why I need Tumblr when I have Twitter. It feels very, very similar to me. So I don't have Tumblr. One of the pieces here is to make sure that you as an author are only doing things you really want to be doing. For me, that's been Twitter and Facebook. So I want to talk a little bit about my experience on Twitter now too, which is interesting because I've made changes there recently too. So for a while, I did what people will tell you to do is a follow back campaign, where you follow everybody who follows you, and you build up this fan base. And I was up to 3,700 followers. But what I found is that I could no longer give that behind-the-scenes interaction to my fans because I couldn't find them. Right. And I guess a follow-back campaign will work for Cory Doctorow or Neil Gaiman, right? Cory Doctorow, he'll follow anybody, right? So he's got several million people that feed into his Facebook feed or his Twitter feed, right? And he follows you back.
He doesn't read it. And anything you post, the odds of him reading it, pretty slim.
He can't. Like, physically, he can't, right? Even at 3,700, I would get 60 to 70 to 80 tweets every 10 seconds.
Right.
Right? It's just physically impossible to keep up at that number. So the idea that you were having any kind of meaningful interaction or that you were providing some kind of behind-the-scenes look, that works for Neil Gaiman because people just care what he had for breakfast because they love his work that much. For us newer writers just starting out, people don't care what we had for breakfast. In fact, they would really prefer not to see what we had for breakfast. Yeah. And so this idea that you were just going to post and that people would respond. And the other thing about follow-back campaigns, you know who was... I had all these authors, right? And we were all tweeting at each other, and we were all putting we got this big book release, blah, blah, blah. We were putting that out there, and no one who was a buyer was reading it. Because all we were doing was cannibalizing each other and tweeting at each other. So I went through and I deleted all those people. And, yeah, I'm down over 1,000. I think I'm down 1,400 or 1,500 people because they've decided they don't want to follow. I'm not following them. They're not going to follow me. Fine. I didn't know who you were. I wasn't interacting with you. There was no significance to that. There was really no economic marketing value. There was no personal value. All it did was get in the way of me being able to read the people that I really wanted to read. So I'm down to 200 followers on Facebook or on Twitter, and I'm very happy with that.
There was an article I read maybe a year ago, and it talked about how not just writers but professionals who are using a Twitter account to support part of their job, and so writers would fall into that. The article was about how what you should do is you should look at your Twitter account and declare Twitter bankruptcy. Unfollow, go through one day and just unfollow anyone who is not related to specifically what your purpose for that Twitter account is. Now, listen, if you're a writer and you have a Twitter account and you talk about your cooking and your writing and your camping and 50,000 other activities, that's not a writer's Twitter account. Maybe it is if you get real big, but it's like you said, people don't care what you had for breakfast. The article basically said you need to focus your Twitter account on providing to followers who really want to know what you're about. Give them what they want. Give them why they're following you. For a writer, that would be information like covers, release dates, tidbits about your writing schedule.
And the truth is, for most of us who are starting out, that's going to be 10 people.
10 people, yeah.
Right? It's going to be 50 people. Maybe a couple of hundred when you start. And that's okay. Because a quality interaction with a couple of hundred people is way better and way more important than a scattered, fragmented interaction with people. So I want to talk about one more piece, and this isn't technically social media. This is older. We're calling email old media. I guess it's old media. I don't know what we're calling it. But studies show, and you can prove this for yourself. Look at your stats. Twitter will now give you interaction stats with your tweets, which is awesome to see how many people see it and how many actually interact with it. It's good to know that stuff, right? Because it will show you how bankrupt your tweets are, right? And how to improve them from being less bankrupt to only moderately, or heavily bankrupt to only moderately bankrupt. But the one place where you will consistently get the best interactions is an email list. When you put together an email list, I get 10 to 12% click-through rates, and 30 and 40, I get about a 42-43% open rate. And mine is not the best list by far. There are better lists that get that from authors that are in higher demand that get better open rates and better click-through rates.
Yeah.
But that is gold for an author. So my argument is that everything that you do should be built around creating more value for an email list and increasing the value of that email list. In fact, today I will be handing out free to my list, everyone on my list, free copies of the second edition of How to Manage Your Money When You Don't Have Any. And this is a strategy which can be very successful. People like being on your list because they get freebies. That builds a lot of loyalty. If they like what they get, I think they're inclined to go after helping you, right? So.
Right. Well, yeah. let's also mention that social media and non-social media like email, technology changes. I mean, yes. Twitter, there was no Twitter, 5-6 years ago? I mean, maybe it was, but I can't remember what year it started. But at one point when Twitter started, nobody knew about it.
Right.
Now it's huge. Facebook I think Facebook has reached its plateau, and I think the days, I'm not saying Facebook's going to go under. I don't think it'll ever go under because people love it. But new tools are going to be developed. Who knows what they are, and writers have to be able to make quick decisions about whether or not to use them.
One of the great comments I've heard about social media, right, is that the problem with social media is that it made human relationships into competition. Okay, so I struggle with social media in my average life because if I don't get enough likes or whatever on a post, I feel like I'm not worthy of attention, worthy of respect, worthy, that my contribution isn't worthy, right? That's the problem I have with social media, is that I believe every human being is worthy of being here on the planet and can make valuable contributions in their life, and I don't think Facebook allows us that sense of being valuable and worthwhile. Now, incredibly useful for marketing. Right? It is useful for me in the marketing sense to know whether or not I'm getting interactions and what kind of interactions I'm getting and all that stuff. And that can be incredibly valuable for an author. The great experiment I did in November and December was releasing the first parts of Gossamer, and then encouraging my 15-year-old to go around school and find people who are interested in being involved in reading that. And it worked. We have Gossamer's Army. There's over 60 followers that, with just little work, there's 60 followers who are avidly waiting for more.
Yep.
Yeah, so we're going to, that is something where social media can really actually make your marketing, but that takes a commitment, right? It takes me pretending to be the character and being online as the character. It takes people knowing that I'm pretending on being the character and that it's not real. It takes followers and insiders and all that kind of stuff and advocates, and that is a lot of time cultivating that. So,
and you mentioned time. Let's be honest here. If you're a writer, whether you're a full-time writer, a fiction writer, nonfiction, indie or traditional, if you're spending hours a day on Twitter, you're not writing.
Yeah, and there's two ways to fall off the cart on that, right? One is that you undervalue the marketing because it doesn't produce direct sales, but it is a major means of creating a fan base that cares.
But you could go overboard too.
And then the other side is that you use that marketing and you think that you're actually producing writing,
right?
When you're not, right? Yeah. That the marketing becomes the thing that you're doing.
There are a handful of writers who I follow on Twitter who put out maybe 2 to 3 tweets a day.
Yep.
And I know because they produce. They're not sitting there just tweeting what they had for lunch and tweeting, oh, look at the nice mountain view I'm seeing from my back window. They're writing. So when I get 2 or 3 tweets a day from them, that's perfect because I want them in their chair getting me my next book.
Yep.
So, well, you know, so I guess the takeaway for this is it's not like we had any real solutions, but for anyone watching this, you've got to consider social media as part of the job now as a writer.
I think it's part of the job, but I think that you need to make sure that whatever you're doing is natural. So if you're comfortable with only Facebook,
right,
and you don't have to interact, you can be one of those people who is comfortable presenting yourself but not interacting in return, right? Do not let this sense that, I mean, you know, I think one of the big examples of that, you do have to ask this question of, is that kind of intense interaction with your fans sustainable over the long term? If you intend to become a big-time writer, there will come a day where you will somewhere down the road disappoint a whole bunch of people by saying, I'm no longer interacting with you on social media.
Right.
That will have to happen. And I want to prepare for success. So some of the way I'm using social media now is designed, it is this real tug of war because you can look arrogant, right, if you design it as if, oh, you should all be caring about what I have for breakfast, right?
Right.
But the other side of it is, down the road, when something takes off, you're not suddenly cutting off a whole bunch of people that you no longer have time to interact with because the demands of your career overtake. So that's a tug of war that I think writers really ought to pay attention to if they plan it.
One of my favorite science fiction writers who I know well, he has an email address. He has a very large fan base. He has an email address, and if you email him, if you know his email and you email him, you don't get a response that day. You may not get a response the next day. It's usually 2 or 3, maybe 4 days down the road you get a response. He doesn't like technology. He's a good writer. He writes science fiction, but he's not. It's not that he's uncomfortable with it. He just knows what he wants to do, and he doesn't have time for it.
And I think that that's what you're going to see as I think we restore balance to this idea of relationships by competition. We're going to have to learn to set limits and boundaries on who we have relationships with, and I think that's why the millennials are leaving Facebook. Right? They're finding ways to set limits and boundaries. And not spend a lot of time trying to cultivate "do you like me" on Facebook. So I agree with you that Facebook may be reaching its plateau and it's going to have to change. And I think the biggest thing they could do would be take the like button off.
Yeah.
You know, just get rid of that idea that our value and worth is determined by how many thumbs up we get for any post.
Yeah. Hey viewers, if you have any suggestions or ideas for future episodes of Novel Ideas, please, please, please let us know. Eric and I are always able to come up with ideas, but we've had a few in the past from you that turned out to be really good ones. So we're always asking our viewers to give us some ideas. You can go to ericwex.com or you can go to geekdad.com and post comments on either place. Give us your feedback on this episode. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about in the future. Or tell us, you know, hey, liked the current episode, and this is what I have to add to it. Eric, we'll come up with something for next week if we don't get a viewer to chime in.
Looking forward to it.
All right, viewers, again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week for Novel Ideas. Take care.
All right, take care.